First off, I wanted to thank all of our co-hosts. Thank you to our co-hosts today for making today's event possible. I want to thank NYSERDA, National Grid, Con Edison, played a tremendous role in making today a huge success, so thank you for that. Also wanted to recognize our community partners as we get started. Thank you to all of you for sharing the event in your network and making our resources available to folks that are required to comply with Local Law 97. I just have a couple housekeeping items that I wanted to share with you all before we jump into our program. First off, there is a large number of folks in attendance today. We are expecting upwards of 1,000 people in attendance today. Please be mindful that in the case of an emergency, there are stairwells. There's an exit on this side of the building. There's also an exit all the way in on the other end, at that side of the building. So please be aware of your exits in case of an emergency. I also wanted to point out that we are currently in the theater space. We will have all of our general sessions in this space, as well as breakout sessions at 11:15 and 3 o'clock. The decarbonization room and the resilience room are all the way at the end, so in this corner and in the opposite corner. And catering, I know most importantly catering, breakfast is available now. We will have lunch for you later. That is available in the corner as well. As we move forward, just want to let you know that you can access the vendor directory that we shared at registration digitally if you are so inclined. You can scan the QR code on your screen to pull up the floor plan of the event space, the agenda, as well as a directory of all the vendors that are exhibiting at today's event. I also wanted to let you know that the agenda as well as the floor plan is available throughout the event space, so please be on the lookout for those signs that will help you hopefully make your way through the event space. Next up, I wanted to briefly go through our agenda for today. We have an action-packed agenda today. First off, we're going to be welcoming Commissioner Agarwal for some introductory remarks. After that, we will be having a Local Law 97 panel discussion. And lastly, a presentation from NYC Accelerator. After that, I will come back up here to walk you through the afternoon's events. But at this time, with no further ado, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Commissioner Agarwal for our introductory remarks. Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Good morning, everybody. All right, that's pretty good. Let's do that again. Good morning, everybody. All right, there we go. I gotta compete a little bit with what's actually far more valuable work going on in all of the conversations. Here I am. Over there. This is a super exciting event. It is absolutely amazing and quite encouraging to see that we have 130 service providers who are exhibiting today. We have 1,350 people who are registered, and if they don't all show up, I may go personally get the rest of them, the stragglers. And it's an indication of how far we have come on the implementation of Local Law 97. It's also, I'd say, a demonstration of the community of entrepreneurs, of service providers, of experts, and of building managers and building boards and owners who have been created around the implementation of this law. I knew from the beginning when I took this role as Chief Climate Officer beginning in 2022, that Local Law 97's implementation was both going to be one of the most important things that the Adams administration would have to do, and one of the most difficult. This is a complex and challenging effort that we are undertaking. We are working on the most important topic, on the most important section of the most important city in the world. And this is in the tradition that New York City has had for nearly 20 years of being a global leader on climate. And what has made it a global leader has been its willingness to do the difficult things. Its willingness to tackle something like congestion pricing, which took 18 years to implement. Its willingness to think systematically about building evaluations, about ratings, about climate resilient standards, and how we build differently in the floodplain, and to think about climate resilience and adaptation, and coastal defense in a systematic way. None of this is easy, none of it is cheap, but all of it is absolutely important. When Local Law 97 was passed in 2019, of course, the world was a little bit different, and the changes that have taken place since then have generally only made our work more difficult. Changes in interest rates, changes in the economics of the real estate industry, changes in consumer confidence. These are all realities that if we choose to pretend that they don't exist, we will get this wrong. Because as much as we have to be committed to the impact that Local Law 97 absolutely has to have, we can't pretend that it is easy or that it is cheap. We have been, in the Adams administration, committed to the implementation of Local Law 97 since day one. And I want to recognize actually one person who is not here, Deputy Commissioner Laura Copeland at the Department of Buildings, who could not be here today due to travel, who has done absolutely phenomenal work along with her team, and many of her colleagues from the Department of Buildings are here today. But they have been doing the spade work to make sure that this law is implemented and is implementable. I'd also like to recognize my colleagues from the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, Elijah Hutchinson, who's here somewhere, but I'm not quite sure where. Oh, there he is. Katie Schmidt and Joe Chavez, another person who plays a critical role but could not be here today, for the work that they do in making sure that Local Law 97 is not implemented only as a series of rules and requirements, which is really the job of the Department of Buildings, but it is an administration-wide effort to impose requirements, but also provide assistance and make sure that this ecosystem that's represented by the 130 exhibitors here grows appropriately. We have come a long way. When this administration started at the beginning of 2022, there was not a single rule in place to implement Local Law 97. We had not even put in place what the carbon coefficients were going to be for 2024, let alone future years. We now have a full set of what I think are clear, ambitious, and highly defensible rules that, as you all know, and most of you here, are in the process of complying with. They are not perfect. No set of rules, no set of human endeavors is ever going to be perfect. And we are doing something that is very much groundbreaking. And so I don't think any of us believes that we will have gotten it absolutely perfect on the first time around. But I'm actually very proud of the work that we've done to balance the need for high standards, for a great deal of transparency, but also a recognition that this is difficult. We have focused constantly on what it will take to do the work, to implement, to comply, to finance all of the work that has to go on. One of the first things we did was actually do a cost of compliance analysis, which showed that this is, between now and 2030, a $15 billion effort to bring New York City's buildings into compliance with Local Law 97. We can't shy away from the magnitude of it. And that has informed what we've done. The implementation of rules, which took a little while, but nonetheless, I think are now in a very good place around PACE financing for buildings. The Affordable Housing Reinvestment Fund, which I think is a big step forward in terms of ensuring that some buildings have alternative compliance paths and that their compliance efforts go to help other buildings that might not be able to go green do so and reduce their carbon emissions. We've focused with a great deal of urgency on J51, which will, we believe, provide nearly $1 billion to help the lower assessed value co-ops and condos, primarily in the outer boroughs, comply with this law. And while it took us a lot of effort to get that J51 through the state legislature, to get it through the city council, Of course, we're out of the frying pan and into the fire, and one of the things we absolutely need to do now is get it extended, presumably, unfortunately now, by next year's session of the state legislature, because there is no more important task to the implementation of Local Law 97 than making sure that those co-ops and condos in the outer boroughs have the funding and financing that they need to do the work. We've implemented a set of good faith effort rules, which of course the concept of the good faith effort is in the law itself. And it reflects the fact, as the law's sponsor, Costas Constantinides, said, we don't want your money, we want your carbon. And the way we've implemented it, again, through, I think, really thoughtful work at the Department of Buildings, allows buildings that may not quite meet their targets in the current period to get a grace period in exchange for making enforceable commitments for how they will reach their 2030 targets. And so to a certain extent, what we're doing is giving a little bit of flexibility now in order to get the far more important prize of those more aggressive targets that are going to be that much more difficult in 2030. One of the things we've also paid a lot of attention to is what is reflected here. First, I want to thank our colleagues at the New York City Accelerator for the important work that they do in getting the word out and being that first point of entry to help buildings that might not know what their first step is to get information about what Local Law 97 is, what programs they might be eligible for, and what this community of providers is to help them on that path. But we paid very close attention also to what it will take to help this community do the work that the buildings will require. And I want to recognize the fact that this community faces its own challenges. When the law was passed, I was on the board of the Urban Green Council, and one of the first things we did was look at how quickly the service provider community was going to have to grow in order to meet the needs of Local Law 97, and it was quite dramatic. And inevitably, things don't pan out quite the way you would hope. And so we recognize that folks in this room have been building the plane while flying it. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, frankly, is a certain amount of resistance among some building owners who hoped Local Law 97 was going to go away, followed by a period when building owners realized, no, the time is now. The Adams administration is not going to walk away from this law, and therefore they've got to get the work done. And I've been really pleased to see the amount of compliance that we've gotten, the amount of filings that we've already seen, the way that we've seen in the benchmarking reports, buildings that were out of compliance for 2024, over the first couple of years of this administration got into compliance in growing numbers. And so I'm really optimistic about what we are going to find later this year when we do get all of these reports, because I think it will tell a very good story. But it is also true that we have to pay very close attention to what it's going to take and to make sure that we don't penalize buildings that are trying to do the right thing. And so one of the things we've found over the last couple of months is we have gotten information, both anecdotal and backed up then by data that we've acquired, and again I want to thank the Department of Buildings for doing this work, that is demonstrated, and I've actually talked to a couple of folks exhibiting this morning who back this up, that we have observed the phenomenon of service providers having to turn down work that buildings had sought. Frankly, because I wish those buildings had been looking for their service providers earlier, but they didn't. But we don't want to wind up penalizing buildings that genuinely tried to find the support to get their work done, to come into compliance with Local Law 97, and were turned away by the contractors that they sought. And so one of the things we wanted to kick off this morning with is to make an announcement, which is that the Department of Buildings has issued a service notice that does a few things that we think will make it easier for this community of service providers and the community of the buildings that have to comply come into compliance with this law. The first is we've extended the deadline to apply for an extension to Local Law 97 reports from the end of this month, so very soon, until August 29th. And so if you represent buildings that haven't done that, we have a whole bunch of tables staffed by our colleagues at the Department of Buildings, and they will get you set up right here and now this morning. Also, if you do file for an extension, we will extend the deadline for the completion of your filings until the end of this year, until December. So that gives this community of service providers a little extra breathing room to get all the work done, to serve your clients well, and to make sure that we at the city get the information we need and get the compliance that Local Law 97 requires. We also recognize that some buildings still have not come into compliance with Local Law 88, which dates back more than a decade, which calls for lighting upgrades and sub-metering in commercial spaces, a project that I helped spearhead when I was in my first role in the Bloomberg administration, running the Plan NYC office. And we've decided that because that law is also really important, but again, abiding by this idea that we want carbon reductions, we don't want fines. We've made the decision that's incorporated into this service notice DOB has issued that buildings that are out of compliance with Local Law 88 can still apply for the Local Law 97 extension, and can qualify for good faith efforts if you submit a plan to come into compliance with Local Law 88 as part of your Local Law 97 submissions. So these are 3 steps that we are taking to give the community of service providers a little more breathing room so that you can do the critical work of helping buildings that are finally waking up to the reality that Local Law 97 is here and is not going away, but you can help them do that work and come into compliance. Because this is really big work. This is really hard work. It is creating business opportunities, it is creating jobs, it is creating innovation, it is critical to the city's economy, as well as to the planet's environment. But we know that it would be short-sighted to let people suffer because the industry hasn't ramped up at the same pace as the demand. And so we think this is a set of pragmatic and thoughtful and environmentally wise extensions that we're allowing, and I hope it makes your lives better. But above all, I hope it ensures that we comply with Local Law 97 and help building owners focus on what matters, which is reducing their carbon emissions and reducing their energy consumption, and not focused on the bureaucracy of deadlines and filing fees and things like that. I want to close by just restating how important this law is. There is no more important thing that the City of New York can do to contribute to the future of this planet than to ensure that Local Law 97 is implemented and is implemented on the timeline that it currently envisions. I know there are still people out there who hope that this law will go away, who hope that it will just get postponed, and I could not overstate how short-sighted and how wrong-headed it would be to think that we cannot innovate, we cannot do the work that solves this problem. Because this is New York City. What we see among these 130 exhibitors is the fact that we have innovation at our backs. We can get this work done. What we see with our colleagues at the Department of Buildings is that New York City government is committed to implementing this law, but doing so in a thoughtful and pragmatic way. And we do still need partnership, particularly from the state, as I said, to extend J51, to ensure that the state's energy efficiency funds are used in a smart way. But I do not believe that there is any challenge that New York City cannot conquer. And this is one that has been part of our city for nearly 20 years. We cannot give up now, we cannot fail, and we cannot postpone. So I want to thank you all for the work that you do. Many of you work for companies that are providing these essential services. I'm glad that this effort has given you work to do. It's a wonderful thing to generate the kind of green jobs that the city needs going forward. But even more so, you're doing God's work because you are on the front lines of saving the planet. And I want to thank you for everything that you've done. Now I'd like to turn it over to Katie Schmidt, the Deputy Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who's going to moderate a panel and will introduce her panelists. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning, and thank you, Red, for those wonderful remarks. Can I go ahead and invite up the panelists who will join me on the stage now? And while you're making your way up here, I just want to say thank you to all of our sponsors who will be speaking here up with me today, but also thank the community of practitioners and the building owners who are here, who are curious, who are looking for solutions. And I think what's so exciting to me about today's event is that it makes so tangible how Local Law 97 is about our climate goals. It's about reducing emissions, but it's also about improving buildings for the people who work there, for the people who live there, and making them healthier and safer and more comfortable. And really ties together that the work we're all doing is improving our physical space and the built environment of New York City. And I think that's only amplified by being in the Navy Yard. This is a space with some of the oldest buildings in New York City that are being retrofitted to house some of the most innovative companies that call our city home, and really seeing very concretely how we can transition buildings that were built in a different era for different purposes to meet our contemporary needs. And so I just couldn't be more thrilled to be here at the Navy Yard to have this conversation with all of you. As Rick said, I'm Katie Schmidt. I'm Deputy Executive Director at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. I want to thank everyone from the city team, and in particular the Department of Buildings, for all the work they have done to get here today and all the work that they're going to do coming out of today to help you all find customers, find service providers, and really put the pieces together to create a thoughtful plan for how to reduce carbon emissions, but also strengthen building systems over the next several decades. So with that, I'm going to actually ask our panelists to introduce themselves when they first speak and talk a little bit about the institution that they work for and what it is doing to help make sure that compliance with Local Law 97 is a viable path forward. But my first question is for Emily Hoffman at the Department of Buildings. I'm wondering, Emily, if the service providers that are here today could say anything to building owners. What is the most important piece of information for service providers to be communicating to their clients today?
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Hi everyone, I'm Emily Hoffman, the Director of OB, that's our office, the Office of Building Energy and Emissions Performance at Department of Buildings. First of all, I want to say I am so impressed with all of the service providers that we've engaged with so far that have really been hustling to get all of the 97 reports in that we've received. You guys are doing an amazing job. We know that there's a lot of building owners that haven't yet started the 97 process, and I think, our advice for the service providers that are just engaging with these owners, you heard Britt say it, we're not looking for your money, we're looking for your carbon. So just engage with us. Engage with us, we're here to help. We're not, we are the enforcement agency, but this is a brand new process for all of us. It's a brand new law, it's complicated, and we're here to help. So, we have our whole staff back our enforcement staff, if you just go beyond that wall, we're here to help. You can sit down with us one-on-one. Our whole entire job right now is just answering questions from service providers, from owners, from the public to help navigate through the system. We don't want the administrative burden to be the reason why you're not applying for Local 97 and submitting your reports. And you guys are doing an amazing job.
Thank you so much, Emily. Next, I want to turn to Ka Wei from NYSERDA. Ka is now at NYSERDA helping implement programs across the state that comes from the mayor's office, so we're incredibly thrilled and proud to have her here today. But drawing from both of those experiences, what do you see as the most common and problematic misconceptions that people have around Local Law 97 that we really need to overcome to show that compliance is possible?
Sure. So my name is Ka Wei. I'm the Director for Planning and Strategy with the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, otherwise known as NYSERDA. We support buildings in making buildings more efficient, helping them electrify, and helping them decarbonize, as well as comply with Local Law 97 through a variety of different mechanisms. We fund plans, technical studies, audits to help identify the opportunities that you have in your building to save energy, to reduce fossil fuel consumption, and to comply with Local Law 97. We also support implementation by providing incentives through our Low Carbon Pathways program that will be closing at the end of this year, but we fund measure packages to help buildings prepare themselves for electrification by reducing their thermal loads and becoming more efficient. And then also we run demonstration programs to show buildings how to take on phased decarbonization to help meet Local Law 97 targets over time. So incredibly proud of the work that the NYSERDA team does. We have a table back there if you have any questions about the type of financial support, planning support that we provide. And so happy to talk more about that, and I know we have a bunch of staff here, Marie and Brian, who can also speak to that. In terms of common misconceptions, I think that there is a concern that Local Law 97 can be very expensive, and then you have to electrify now, right? And I think those are two myths that are not true. So first of all, I think part of what is really unique about Local Law 97 is because it provides declining emission targets over time, is that the buildings can really take a phased approach. And at the start of a building's journey, we think that some of the most practical things to do include taking on measures that reduce your building's energy costs by making buildings more efficient, by recovering and reusing waste heat, by reshaping thermal loads to reduce your peaks, right, to reduce those demand charges. So I think that those are all opportunities that are very cost effective, can be low-hanging fruit, and can also help you comply with Local Law 97. And more importantly, prepare you for electrification when your building is ready to electrify, because you've reduced your thermal load, so you can reduce the cost of the equipment you have to put in, as well as the operating costs associated with electrified equipment down the road.
Thank you, Ka. Next, I want to turn to our utility partners. Con Ed and National Grid, as you all know, own and operate the foundational and essential infrastructure that powers not only our buildings, but transportation, our infrastructure services in telecom and wastewater, and really are both essential partners to Local Law 97 Compliance, but also to making sure that we have the power in place to make sure that a building that's working to reduce its emissions is able to function well. So I'm going to turn to you first, Greg, and then I'm going to ask the same question of Donald. After you introduce yourself, can you talk a little bit about how your respective utilities are helping building owners in Local Law 97 compliance?
Good morning, everybody, and really impressive gathering we put together here. I'm surprised. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, but really impressive gathering. I'm Greg Elcock, the Vice President of Customer Clean Energy Programs at Con Edison, and I would say that at the end of the day, everything to do with your EE programs or your energy efficiency programs and building electrification programs ultimately comes to my team. So one of the things I would say here is we have been partners, I guess, from the start with respect to helping stakeholders along their journey and providing that economic support to help you take the next steps and hopefully be successful. So as a company, broadly, we help you with all of your service needs. And then in addition to that, we have a specific team that I run that really helps the economics work, right, by providing incentives. And I think, I'll start there and maybe we can build on that as we go.
Hi, good morning. Donald Shabalska from National Grid. I am in our policy and regulatory strategy team, which means a lot of the work that I do is really analytical, and the modeling that I've been doing, they've been also on the ground floor working with utilities and New York City DOE to make sure that we are your partners. I'll provide some insight over the next few minutes in the work that I've done in terms of modeling, but I've tried to make sure to work with our engineers and the engineers that are in this room and the technology providers to make sure that the work that we're doing actually reflects reality. But to answer your specific questions, the low-hanging fruit to get to comply with Local Law 97 is energy efficiency. We actually have funding that's available, that our regulators have approved it. We have a table as well, and my colleagues are here and they'll be on other panels. But to answer your question, specifically and directly, we actually have incentives to help you achieve Local Law 97 compliance today. And the first action I would suggest, and I think we'll probably all involve in agreement to get there, and I'll second everything Ka said, is energy efficiency. And I just want to let you know, we, and not just Greg and Con Ed, we have both obtained funding from our regulator, and it's available for your energy efficiency programs.
Thank you so much. And this is actually a question to the whole panel. I'm interested in what steps your organizations are taking to make sure that building owners can access, or that the programs you run are easy to understand, easy to find support to access, easy to apply to your specific building, and what is the best way for a building owner who's interested in a program or a funding stream to contact your organization to tap into those programs?
So this is a great question because I definitely think this is an area of improvement that NYSERDA is working on, where we understand our website at times can be challenging to navigate. So we're actually in the process of working with our regulators and our utility partners to think about developing what we're calling a one-stop shop, one website where you can enter some information and we will direct you to the right program that can support the needs of your building. But in the meantime, I think that you can, you can obviously go through our website, but there's also my colleagues at the NYSERDA table who can help you navigate which program would be the best fit depending on your specific need. If you are a multifamily building, we, for example, provide 75% of a funding for a study for a multifamily building to understand what your opportunities are to save energy, what efficiency measures may be cost effective for you to undertake now, as well as a longer term vision for how you would comply with Local Law 97 over time. And so for affordable multifamily buildings, we currently cover 75% of the cost of the study, working with likely one of these service vendors that's here today. And for small multifamily buildings that are affordable, we're actually currently offering 100% cost share through a new program called SAMES, S-A-M-E-S. If you're interested, please talk to my colleague Maria at the table, or you can email multifamilyinfo@nyserda.ny.gov to find out more. We're also really excited about a new program that we just launched in April called Owner's Rep. So I know that for especially those who live in condos and co-ops, it can be difficult to access certain types of funding and incentives. And we've just started a new program that will provide support to help you find those funding sources, manage your projects, develop the appropriate scope of work, as well as support post-construction activities such as commissioning, as well as optimization of equipment performance once it's installed. So really excited about that opportunity as well. And then if you are in the commercial, institutional, industrial space, we also provide funding, usually around 50, at times 75%. And you can find out more about those programs by emailing FlexTech, FLEXTECH, at NYSERDA.ny.gov. So again, I'll have colleagues in subsequent panels who can speak more to the details of these programs, but just want to reiterate, we're here to help you, help building owners plan and undertake measures to support compliance with local 197.
Yeah. So in terms of just doubling down on what Kaz said, number of programs that we have in the marketplace, please, when you leave here at some point during the sessions or in between your breakout sessions, visit our table and reach out to one of our folks there, and you'll get a lot more information with respect to the specific offerings, in addition to which we have some breakout sessions that folks are going to be speaking in. One of the things I think folks should do is, start. It may seem overwhelming at first and an enormous challenge to begin the process, but the testimony is out here. We have 100+ odd service providers that are just specifically here to meet your needs. And you have the utilities, you have NYSERDA, you have the Department of Buildings, all with the specific aim of helping you along the journey. So my view is, start with building one, right? Or if you have one building, begin to think about what is that measure or suite of measures that, I want to start with and get moving on the journey, and then figure out, how you work with our various partners to figure out the economics and how you make that work.
Right, and from Department of Buildings perspective, obviously we don't have incentive programs, but we, we're charged with enforcing this massive law that tackles 50,000 buildings, and there's a lot of similarities between all of these buildings, but there's also, the law has also been, we've written rules so that there is some flexibility in different pathways. So the law has become incredibly complex. And so what we've done is we've put out these, I'm sure most of you have seen these guides on, different compliance pathways. So if you're an affordable housing building and you follow Article 21, we have a detailed guide, that tells you about each one of the prescriptive energy conservation measures, what's required there. So it's a plain language guide to the law. And if you're on the Article 320 pathway, this is a much more detailed guide with lots of information about the different compliance pathways and nuances within the rules that we have, that we have out there. We have copies of these on our Department of Buildings table. If you haven't seen them, they're printed out. You can take a look, QR code, you can access them easily. So that's just explaining the law. And then in the past, 4 months or so since we've launched the 97 reporting portal, we have, so many different guides that are out there on the filing process, how to go through the mechanics of paying a fee in our DOB Now process, how to, share your Energy Star portfolio manager data with us, how to navigate the Beam platform. So we have, these additional guides that are out there, and what we're seeing through the evolution of this process, the filing process, is we're getting a plethora of questions into our email accounts, and what we've just recently did is we updated our FAQs. So that will be going up on our website, and this is just based on the questions that we're getting of the mechanics of the filing process. We also, you heard Britt say that we issued a service notice yesterday, so we put those details in our FAQs that should be up on our website. If they're not up there today, they should be up there later this week. And then I just want to point out that one other thing we started, we realized, we're getting hundreds and hundreds of questions a week. So in order to be more efficient as far as answering questions to service providers, we've started these weekly service provider meetings where they're live, and they are just coming to us. We're answering questions, any questions they have. There's a whole group of service providers on this call. If you are not in one of these meetings, come find us at our Department of Buildings table. We can add you to these. This is just another way of sharing information. So we're looking at various ways to get information out there quickly to the industry so that everyone can understand how to file prior to local law 97.
All right, so in an effort not to be repetitive, because my response will be very similar to Greg and Kaz, Well, no, I'm going to actually, if you don't mind, take a slightly different perspective, which I think will be very insightful. So there are 1 million buildings in New York City, nice round number, every typology you can think of. Like if you are a building manager of a multifamily in Brooklyn that was built in the 1980s, your strategy is very different to comply with Local Law 97. Let's say if you're a building manager for a same multifamily building in the Upper West Side that was built in the 1940s. If you remember nothing about my remarks, is the following I would ask that you just remember. There's no such thing as one size fits all. There are really a lot of tools in this toolbox. So I'll give you a proof point for that. As I mentioned, I'm in the policy strategy team. We started thinking about this going back to 2018, so we did a lot of internal modeling. A lot of the internal modeling that we did was, it shows, we are also the gas utility in Boston, so Boston Gas, New York City, same thing. If buildings do hybrid heating, you can drastically reduce your emissions at a fraction of the cost. So what is hybrid heating? Which basically means you install heat pumps, you use those heat pumps in the shoulder months, October, November, let's say spring and April. You basically use gas in January and February. So the next question from our leadership was, well, is this technology available? Is it commercially available? We went out and looked, and I said, look, the technology is commercially available. And by the way, we came to the same conclusion when we did some modeling when Carl was working with the city. We did that in 2019. So fast forward to a few years, and now, I don't know if they're in this, I'm assuming they're in the Expo. There's a company called Ecosystems. They actually built one of the first ones, hybrid systems, and I think in a building on Fifth Avenue and 13th Street, multi-family built pre-war, and that's the technology that they utilize. So that technology seemed theoretical when we were doing the modeling work, but it's here and now, right? So again, that building will be fully compliant with Local Law 97, and they use hybrid heating system. And I hope the takeaway is not maybe we should pursue hybrid heating. Really, the takeaway is that there are lots of options, and again, there's no such thing as one size fits all.
Thank you. Emily, could you speak a little bit about what a phased approach is and how building owners can work with service providers to understand what work makes sense to do now to meet their Local Law 97 goals, working with technologies that are market ready, and how do you plan for the future for work that we won't be doing for another 15, 20 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way that Local Law 97 is structured is that the emission limits are right now they were designed to essentially bring up the lowest 20% of the highest emission buildings into compliance. What we're seeing now is that right now in this first compliance period, the first 5 years, is that 90% of these buildings, based on benchmarking data, are compliant with those limits. And so really, building owners should be looking out to 2030 and beyond. And a lot of these buildings can get to their 2030 limits by doing these energy efficiency measures, just reducing the consumption in the buildings. Lots of different, service providers are here and different technologies out there, that may not involve replacing heating or cooling systems. Maybe it's just looking at the controls within the building. Doing your 88, upgrading your lighting, make sure all your lighting has controls there. But also just optimizing the way that the energy is consumed in the building without actually replacing, systems. If we do have we have a beneficial electrification credit that we're offering in Local Law 97. So if you are displacing any on-site fossil fuel consumption in your building, you get this, it's a negative carbon coefficient with that technology that you're installing. So the earlier you do it, you can, use this benefit out to the out years, out until 2036. So it's, so we're looking into the future and trying to incentivize buildings to look far ahead, and really trying to also make sure that the ones that are acting early on are getting more benefit there. And there's a two-part side to that too. We don't want, before I say that, based on analysis, it looks, most buildings do not have to electrify to get into compliance with 97 until 2035. Really, it's far out on the horizon for most buildings within the city. So it's really the energy efficiency component that buildings should be looking at right now. This is the first year on the horizon getting to decarbonization by 2050. So building owners should also be thinking of, their capital planning when equipment is, the end of their useful life, and start thinking about those decisions in terms of their own building and their financing and everything like that to get to that 2050, decarbonization. So I think it's a new way of thinking for a lot of building owners, and fortunately, a lot of the service providers here have been doing this thinking and can help building owners, come up with those types of plans.
Thank you so much. Ka, I'm hoping you can speak a little bit about some of the most exciting, innovative technologies that NYSERDA is seeing, ranging from building management systems and how we program our buildings to technologies that require capital investment.
So I think part of the journey we're all on is we have 25 years to go still. So right, I think there's a lot of promise around technology innovation to make some of the retrofits that we need to undertake in our buildings easier, more streamlined and standardized, right? So I think a lot of, especially if you're trying to do electrification, it's a lot of a kind of a custom design, engineering, install process with equipment that not necessarily has a ton of performance data out there. So I think we're all kind of in that new space. So I think where NYSERDA is focusing on as a big kind of priority area for our innovation and product development portfolio is testing and supporting the development of what we call drop-in solutions that can provide efficient cooling and heating. So for example, I'm sure many folks in this room have already heard about our Clean Heat for All program, where we partnered with NYCHA and NYPA to develop kind of what we call window saddle heat pumps that essentially take less than 2 hours to install. You kind of install it almost like where you would position your air conditioner on the window. They're nicer shapes though. There's one that's a saddle shape that kind of loops over one side of the wall and the other side. And they're cheaper. They're easier to install. You can install it per room. And so far the kind of testing has shown that they're actually very reliable and efficient in terms of generating both heating and cooling. So that kind of obviously provides benefits by providing that access to kind of both heating and cooling over time. Similarly, along the same vein of kind of a commoditized solution, we're also looking at drop-in PTHPs. So package terminal heat pumps that would potentially fit, a lot of the older buildings in New York are not even that old. They have that kind of cutout slot where people have installed the ACs permanently. So we're looking to support technology development where you could essentially replace that wall in your facade with a heat pump, package terminal heat pump solution that would provide both the cooling you already get from your air conditioner, but cheaper and more efficiently, because heat pumps operate on a 2 to 3 times more efficient than traditional fossil systems. And then would essentially, you drop that into that hole in the facade when you're ready to do that work. Another area that we're also looking at, and we're doing some R&D around, is a drop-in steam heat pump. So as you know, for a lot of our pre-war older buildings, a lot of the buildings, I think 60% of the larger buildings in the multifamily space are on 1 to 2 pipe steam, which inhibits certain retrofit opportunities when it comes to electrification. So we're looking at, well, can we potentially support product development for a heat pump that generates steam that could just be dropped into your cold air furnace room? So that's also an exciting kind of transition technology that we see could play an important role in helping, especially some of the harder to electrify typologies in New York City. And I think another component of that is that when looking at kind of partial electrification, as well as I think the building that Don mentioned, especially for hydronic buildings, there's a big opportunity around offsetting part of that fossil consumption that you use to heat the hot water loop through a heat pump. That would also reduce kind of your peak gas needs, which is also kind of very appealing. So I think lots of exciting things in the technology space, as well as I think in terms of energy management, I think we really are excited about the potential role that AI and machine learning can help play in helping optimize how to save energy and optimize consumption within a building depending on occupants' needs, uses, and functions. So I think a lot of exciting things underway that we hope to bring into the market soon.
Thank you. And Donald and Greg, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about how the utilities are leveraging technology to help us better use energy consumption data, and how building owners can leverage that data to identify the best solutions for their buildings. So maybe we'll start with Con on this one.
So the utilities are really doing demonstration projects, proof of concept. So to give you a technology portfolio is network geothermal. We're doing demonstration projects, we have funding. It's probably a solution for like campuses, probably in the outer boroughs, you could have them in mind, but it's probably somewhere that's not as congested. We're looking at district heating systems. Again, we have funding to demonstration projects. My colleagues can talk about that. The one demonstration project I've spent a good decade on is in Utah Creek, New York City's largest wastewater treatment plant. We're taking food waste and wastewater, and we're making low carbon fuels from those. The city is now expanding food waste. We could use that as well to produce energy. And just to give you a sense of what's coming around the corner, one of my colleagues is in Europe this week. IEA, International Energy Agency, talked about the utilization of low carbon fuels. And the reason I mention it is Germany, Sweden, Denmark have very aggressive targets to adopt these technologies. And the reason that's exciting, it's coming to the US. And as I was driving in today this morning, I said I am not going to talk about synthetic fuels. No one knows what I'm talking about if I talk about them, but I'm going to talk about them because I went to get a cup of coffee, and there's a company in the corner, Standard Carbon. It seems like, way out there technology, but just so you know what synthetic fuels are, they're going to split water. You split water, you take the hydrogen, and you mix it with CO2, and you get synthetic fuels. As I mentioned, I told Katie I was going to talk about it, but don't mention that technology because I thought it's way out there. But the technology is available. It is commercially available today. And as I mentioned, there's a company in the corner, Standard Carbon, that's actually can utilize that technology. The issue isn't that isn't commercially available, is that the really challenge for companies like National Grid is that we have to take that technology and scale it. And to scaling it seems easy, but to do that, you need the right policy frameworks. So, really the distillation, I guess, the distillation of my comments is that we are working on a lot of exciting technologies, as Con mentioned, and as Greg mentioned, and I'm actually very optimistic about the technology. The challenge will be, again, creating the right policy framework to scale.
I guess just building quickly on what Donald said on the technology piece. One of the things I've mentioned is that we're looking at thermal energy networks, right? For future applications, what does that look like? The use of geothermal technology, waste heat, and looking at what that business model could look like in the future. Maybe that becomes an application that we seamlessly use. We do this in 2030, 2035, and maybe we say, hey, you know what? We've now executed on all these thermal networks that we would have piloted. We probably will pilot 3 of those sometime this year, or I should say submit pilots for approval. Let me just be very, very careful about what I say. We will submit pilots for approval sometime next month. If the Department of Public Service approves, we move to construction, and again, proof of concept for the future. This is a long journey that we're going to be on. And in addition to doing things that we know are tried and proven today, we have a number of things in the hopper here. What I'd like to also say is that on the technology tip, the basics do work. Make sure that building is as efficient as possible. The old school tighten that building, air sealing, things like that absolutely work. Energy efficiency first. Work with a proven service provider for the intervention that works for you as you begin to this continuum of the local law 97 compliance.
Thank you. And Greg, can I stay with you, and can you talk a little bit about what Con Ed is doing to make sure our grid and our distribution system are ready as we electrify buildings over time?
That question. So I'll answer it like this. We have an obligation to serve our customers in this franchise in the boroughs in Westchester County, and we will continue to do that. Looking at what we just said here, There is some headroom that I think exists for the foreseeable future. We have some time to do that. And I think, I won't go into much detail on this, but if you look at the projects that the company has in place now in terms of building out required infrastructure, Brooklyn, other places that we are doing that at present, I feel confident to say that Con Edison as a company will continue to be able to be the electric, steam, and gas service provider of choice in the area.
Thank you. And can I get a time check? 10 minutes? Awesome. Ka and Emily, I hope that you can speak a little bit about the intersection of both city and state laws and policies and how we see that thriving market transformation and making a real difference for the options in the marketplace available for building owners. And then also, where do you want to see the market go? How do you think we can continue to use government action to help expand the market and make it more attuned to the needs of building owners?
Sure. So I think just to start, I think New York City has really been leading the way with respect to supporting building decarbonization in a way that meets our broader state goals. So New York City obviously passed integral laws like Local Law 88, Local Law 87, Local Law 84. So those are the benchmarking requirements for buildings that went into effect for 15 years ago now, or around that time. Those were the requirements to do retro-commissioning every 10 years for large buildings, as well as the lighting and sub-metering law that Britt mentioned earlier. So those are integral foundational policies that gave us the data and understanding of how buildings are performing today so that we can right-size both policy and incentive and financial opportunities to support buildings to improve efficiency and continue to save on energy costs over time. And then I think New York City further led the way with Local Law 154, which required essentially all electric new construction, starting in, I'm forgetting the dates because I'm now on the state side, but earlier than the state law required. And I think we saw that action happen even before the deadlines for those laws, right? Even 2 to 3 years before those requirements came into effect in New York City, I believe DOB was seeing permitting activity that essentially everybody coming in to build new was already going electric 2 to 3 years, especially in terms of the large building size before the law came into effect. So I think similarly, the state obviously in 2019 passed the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, which put the statutory requirement for the state to achieve 85% emissions reduction by 2050, and a suite of supporting policies and targets to get us there, including renewable electricity targets to make sure the electricity that we use for future heating systems is clean, as well as funding support, in particular through regulatory proceedings to help buildings decarbonize. So I think one of the most important things that's happened recently is that in May, the state regulator, the Public Service Commission, authorized an additional $5+ billion in funding over the next 5 years to be administered through our colleagues at Con and National Grid, as well as NYSERDA, that is direct financial incentives to make the economics of building efficiency, weatherization, and where it makes sense, electrification work. So I think those are, very helpful and complementary laws and policies and financial support to help put buildings on the right track. But I think in terms of, I think the data piece continues to be really important, especially at a statewide level, as well as understanding how the kind of data, consumption data, benchmarking data for smaller buildings, because it really is integral to helping both develop policy as well as develop kind of building programs to support buildings becoming more efficient. I think on the broader market development space, I think really proud of the technology and product innovation work we're doing. Also demonstrations like the Empire Building Challenge, where we're targeting hard to decarbonize subsectors, really tall buildings, hospitals. How do you start planning for that phased approach over time now? What makes sense in terms of what's cost effective today and what is going to make sense potentially later down the road. I think getting better market data around just what buildings are doing and how buildings are meeting compliance is also really integral to kind of show buildings it's possible, right? Case studies, playbooks. Absolutely agree, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but there are definite also kind of trends that you see for buildings, to Don's point, if you're a medium-sized multifamily building built in the 1980s, there are common configurations there that, make sense to identified more or less a common set of strategies around. And so the more data that we can get out into the space to show that, you see real cost savings with weatherization. Your tenants, your residents are more comfortable, right? And when you electrify, that the systems perform the way that we think they're going to perform, and that we can prove that out over and over again so that we can make financing easier. I think those are all key aspects of market development. And I think given we're at a Service Vendor Expo, I just also want to make a big plug for building out the clean energy workforce that we need today and tomorrow. Already building jobs make up about 60% of the clean energy jobs that exist today, and that's only expected to grow given the needs that we are seeing across the workforce. So I think that's also a really pivotal aspect of market development that we can.
And another thing I wanted to touch on was that, we still have the energy code that regulates, mostly for new construction, but it also regulates, alterations in existing buildings. We're going through the process now where we're going to be updating the New York City Energy Code again later this year. The state is also updating the energy code. The state and the city have to fall in line, although the city has a more stringent energy code. And we've been seeing changes at the, through the International Energy Code and with ASHRAE, that's what the states have to adopt, that gets trickled down to New York City. We make our own modifications locally. But what we're seeing there on a national level is also that buildings are, looking at being built to be grid ready, like grid interaction ready. So I think demand response is going to play, when you're using energy is going to start playing a big role. Buildings are going to have to be energy storage ready. So, just making sure that these new buildings that are being built can be adapted to these technologies as they come on. And I think we're also going to be seeing a lot of the existing buildings, looking into when they're using energy, as well as, reducing consumption, but, looking at renewable sources, energy storage, all of that stuff is going to start, really being a pivotal role in the decarbonization world.
Thank you. And I think it's time to start wrapping up. So as a last question to each of you, can you talk about one change that your institution is making today in order to better meet our decarbonization and local law 97 needs? And then one change that you think you'll need to make in 15 or 20 years to serve New Yorkers of the future? And just, how your institutions need to change with our built environment and our energy needs.
Wow, it's a little hard to think 20 years out right now, but I will say I think it's one of the things that I mentioned in an earlier question, that we are working on a one-stop shop, common intake. You enter your information on one website, tell us what you're looking for, and then we will direct you to the right program that can meet those needs. We think that would be really valuable in helping navigate a plethora of opportunities and programs that are out there, especially since some of those are different depending on the building sector or subsector you're in. So we really hope to be bringing something like that online, as well as helping do more integration across our programs. So if you're an affordable multifamily building and you're undergoing a weatherization retrofit, maybe you can also at the same time receive your community solar credit to further reduce your bill operating costs, right? Since we run programs both in the building, solar, and other kind of transportation as well. So trying to really become more of a one-stop shop at NYSERDA, trying to be frankly more customer-centric and customer-focused, with all of y'all being the customers. So I think if we can make those upgrades in the near term, that would be very valuable in helping to provide clarity, transparency, and helping streamline access to our programs.
20 years. In 20 years, I think we'll be celebrating the success of Local Law 97 and looking to see what the next deep dive. Let's start there. I think one of the things I may focus on the practical, because I think we want some nuggets to take away, is that in addition to us individually figuring out how we simplify our processes, I think across the service providers, the incentives and the offerings and the outreach, I think we're going to begin to see in this next cycle, this new nanny cycle that we're talking about, additional simplification of processes that makes it easier for both service providers, stakeholders, and buildings to take advantage of all the compliance, not only Local Law 97, but all of the offerings I think we have across the enterprise from at least the three of us.
20 years, we'll be, seeing the success of all of this. That's how, I feel. But, DOB is really trying to make sure that we are, a partner with the service providers and that we're, offering up resources. We've been spending the last several years, deep in the weeds on writing the rules and regulations around Local Law 97, and we just want to make sure that everyone understands practically how to report this information, how to, understand what pathways are available with the ultimate, goal of decarbonization. So we want to make sure that we're, we still are the enforcement agency, but we're also, want to act as a partner in being able to provide you the resources that are necessary to get you on that journey to decarbonization.
Okay, so to answer your first question, what have you done today structurally? We have a much bigger EE program, and we have a lot more colleagues, than when I started the company, and we have a lot more incentives. So that's a change to help you achieve your targets. And again, the low-hanging fruit is energy efficiency. In terms of in 15, 20 years, so let's say if I was in a panel today with NYSERDA and DOB, and let's say Con and Ready, I would say, my wish list is to back, when you think about regulations and policies, is to please make them technology neutral. I'm going to start stealing the line that Rick used this morning, and I think you said it too. What was it? Like, I don't want your money, I want your emissions. That really resonated with me. I'm going to start stealing it. And I've talked to a lot of you in this room, right? You want flexibility and making technology neutral, because really the bottom line for the policy regulation should be is that we just want you to reduce your emissions. We don't care how you do it. It seems very simple and logical, but I'm in the trenches of the policy world. We all have our biases, and of course I have my bias too. I'll say, why don't we use hydrogen and low carbon fuels? And someone will say, why don't we electrify? But I think to take that sort of your biases away and just say, look, in 2050, where do I want to be? I want to reduce emissions, and not to allow my technology bias sort of shape the policy and the strategy, the roadmap that we're designing, is actually much harder than people may think it is. So that's my wish list: make policies that are technology neutral.
Thank you so much. And to close us out, Emily, can you tell everyone what you hope they get out of today, whether you're a service provider or a building owner?
Yeah, I think out of today, I hope that if you're a building owner and you're here, you connect with a service provider and you start on your way to understanding how to report 97. And if you're a service provider, I hope that you're engaging with DOB if you haven't already, and make sure that you've stopped by our tables and you get your questions answered. So that's what we're here to do. And we also take suggestions. So anyone having suggestions, please come over to DOB and talk to us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I think we'll be milling about for a little bit, and everyone has tables where their colleagues are here to help. But really look at the deadline extensions. The goal is to make sure that everyone has time to get the reporting done, because it's the reporting that's important.